Welcome to Accountable, where your business is our business. Hosted by David R. Peters. Today's guest is Dr. Lindsay Andiola.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Accountable, the podcast for CFOs by a CFO. Hey, my name's Dave. Thanks so much for being here. One of the things that has been in the news here a lot more recently is all of the business woes when it comes to recruiting. A lot of businesses right now are really having trouble getting good people in the door. We've had a few recruiters on this podcast just talking about kind of how recruiters are looking at that problem and how exactly the needs of candidates have changed and what firms are kind of trying to do to attract new talent and what that looks like. One piece of this, though, that I think has been kind of left out, and one piece that I really haven't seen a whole lot about, is what are universities and colleges doing to prepare students for this new way of working? The working world is just very different from what it was a few years ago. I mean, we have more and more firms that are embracing the idea of remote work. We have more and more people entering into the field that aren't really going to know a traditional office environment. And so how are universities and colleges, how are they getting ready students for this new working world? I mean, what does that look like? What are they doing? How have things changed? Also, the role of the accountant has changed in organizations. I mean, we've seen a drop off in the number of students that are graduating in accounting majors because the skill set is not really what it was prior to this. I mean, there's a lot more emphasis now on kind of analytical skills and things like that. And yet with that, you see a lot of students that are not pursuing accounting majors these days. So what are colleges and universities? What are they doing about that? What are we doing about the pipeline of folks that are coming into the industry? My guest this week on Accountable is Lindsay Andiola. Lindsay is an assistant professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. She is a great person to talk to about this because she is very involved at the university level of just, she works with students every day, but also she does a lot of things kind of beyond that, serving on committees and doing things for students to help get them ready for the work that awaits them. And so I think that she has really unique insight into these issues about what education, what kind of those that are in education, what are they doing as a result of kind of this new way of working? And so this week, we're going to be talking about that with Lindsay. Lindsay's been on the show before. She's a great guest. She has does a lot of really good research and really advocates for students, which I think makes her a great person to talk about this particular topic. So with that, folks, enjoy my conversation with Lindsay Andiola. My guest this week on Accountable, Lindsay Andiola. Lindsay, welcome to Accountable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, it's good. That you've come back here, and especially right now, because I have to tell you, I mean, this is interesting times in our industry, to say the least, right? I mean, we have a very unique situation here where we have that, really for the first time in a while, I think that a lot of firms are struggling to find talent. They're really struggling to kind of get new people in the door and sort of getting them, get them interested in accounting. One of the things that I think has been kind of interesting is a lot of the partners and things like that I talk to, they seem to feel like there's this kind of disconnect right now between, people coming out of school, the students that are coming out of school, and, kind of the way that we've sort of normally thought about the industry. And I just wanted to hear your perspective on that. is there really this disconnect? I mean, is there really this sort of maybe generational gap between students that are coming out of school now and maybe some of the partners and things like that that are out there at the firms?
That's a good question. I think there's a couple things going on. I think for years and years, there's been conversations about perhaps the accounting firms not paying what students are worth per se. And I think that conversation somewhat stemmed from when we moved to the 150 credit hours.
Right.
That these students are doing a whole extra year of school, and there wasn't necessarily a compensating factor where salaries increased in a way that compensated for that type of additional effort that the students were going through. And I've talked to my students about this, and the other part of this is that for a long time, I mean, accounting was the job where you made a lot of money, even coming out of
Right.
school. That was the thing,
Right.
is you made good money, and it was more than what other business majors were able to offer. And
Right.
so, but I literally just talked to someone today, and they were saying, you come out of our analytics department, or you come out of our finance department, and they're making $70,000 a year, and
Right.
they're only having to do 120 credit hours to get there.
Right.
Um, and so I don't know if there is a disconnect. I mean, you have
Yeah.
smart students who are driven, and they see this. They see what their friends are making. They talk about this, and so so there's part of it of just having to meet that demand. If you want the
Yeah.
best students, then then you have to be offering something competitive
Yeah.
to align with that. And so to me, on that part of it, I think that there is a little bit of a disconnect, that maybe there's just not an awareness of what business students can make in these other paths right now. And that's a problem, because that's it. They've lost their competitive advantage from the salary perspective per se. Um,
I
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a great point, and I want to kind of reiterate some of the things that you said, because I think that some of this I think is really interesting. Is that we've always historically looked at accounting as not just, hey, this is a good career, like, hey, this is a profitable career. I mean, this is something that that you can really go far in, and and I think I think that some of that I don't know, the appeal there, I think, has maybe kind of been stripped away a little bit. So, I mean, does the industry need to change? Because this is the part that I think that is kind of the struggle here. Because if there is a disconnect, somebody's got to move. So somebody's got to. I mean, it's either the firms or it's the students, or maybe it's some kind of combination of both. So is it firms kind of realigning their expectations, or is it maybe students realigning their expectations, or is the answer maybe somewhere in the middle?
you know, I mean, I think from the salary perspective, I don't know if there is another option.
Right.
Unless the other industries start bringing their salaries down. I mean, I think
Yeah.
I think that has to be acknowledged, that if these other majors are making that type of money, then there has to be an adjustment there in some way. And part of that could be from the firm's perspective to start thinking about, are there ways to be outsourcing? A lot of the bigger firms have moved towards, outsourcing and things like that to maintain being able to provide higher salaries
Hmm.
to the core audit teams. Having to kind of shift the way that they're doing their work so that they can get some of it done more cheaply, while also being able to pay, their employee, the knowledge worker employees more
Yeah.
money. So to me, that's one way to do it. And I know that some firms are really thinking about that as an option, especially as we get into this robotic process automation. And, there's a lot of technology coming out there now. And, there's a time cost to figuring all of that
Yeah.
piece of it out.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a way to maybe balance it so that perhaps you don't need as many employees and you can pay those good ones more, to kind
Right.
of level set a little bit here in that regard. When we were talking about this, you had mentioned that the other expectation issue is around this willingness to work.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think that that students who opt into accounting, they know they're going to work hard.
Right.
In general, I think the students that are, and I would say that for other majors too, but so I don't think that that's necessarily the issue, is that they don't want to work hard. I think the issue is more around having some control over the working hard.
I see.
I do think that the new workforce wants more autonomy over their
Yeah.
control, and that has come out of the pandemic, because people are working remotely more, and they've gained maybe a little bit of autonomy by not being right next to their supervisor every day for
Right.
however many hours it takes to get the job done. And I've talked to some practitioners about this, that the big firms have started to try to focus a lot more on like output, the
Yeah.
quality of the output, and not so much the input, which when I was in practice, I felt like there was maybe too much emphasis on the input. What I mean by that is, during busy season, sometimes I'd be waiting on a client and I didn't have any more work to do, and it was 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I was kind of sitting around for a couple of hours waiting for like the team to be done. And that's just not good for anybody to be in that situation.
Well,
And so I think that switch is important.
Well, and I think that this is one of those things here, folks, and I hope that the listeners out there that they understand kind of where I'm coming from, and I think where Lindsay's coming from too. I think in our industry, and Lindsay, feel free to disagree here, but there is sort of this this kind of weird pride. I don't even know if that's really the right word, but that like I have conquered busy season. There's like the sort of like billable hour pride that comes along with sort of making it in accounting. And so what I hear from some partners, not all, but certainly some partners, is this idea that people coming in now, they don't really want to work busy season. When I first started, I wanted to work busy season, and there's kind of this weird sense of that you have to sort of pay your dues. I don't even know if that's really the right terminology, but it seems to kind of almost go along with the industry. And I think that when we get workers in that maybe aren't willing to sort of focus in on the input, putting in the hours, okay, kind of to your point, that maybe that looks like almost like they're soft. Is that I don't know, that may be a harsh word, but that seems to be almost the sense that I get.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, and I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I mean, I think, I
Right.
do think that when I talk to my students about like busy season and what it means, and, I bring practitioners in and they talk about what it looks like, especially now, because it looks different right now than it's looked in the past few years. And I don't, I mean, I think they understand the need for busy season, and, what the goal is, and that, and some of the good of, okay, we finished this job and it's done. And there's, kind of, I do think that those aspects are still there. I don't think that it's like, oh, I just don't want to work these hours.
Right.
I think the students do want, and I think they always probably wanted it, is to feel like there's value in
Yeah.
those hours they're putting in. And I don't know if that maybe has always been the case, that it kind of to the point of, oh, I'm paying my dues, like this is how I do it. I don't think they don't really want that. I think they're fine with it if they feel like this is meaningful work and I really need to be doing this work. But I think if they get the feeling that this is like busy work, or, they could do this faster, or they could, any of those things, that they struggle with that. They question that part of it. And I don't know. I mean, I did when I was in practice
Yeah.
sometimes, and so, I don't think it's the wrong thing necessarily to think about. It goes back to, if refocusing on the output. If someone can give you high quality output in 6 hours, and not 8 hours, then that should be okay. But there's this conflict with those billable hours.
Yeah.
Of how to kind of manage that from the firm's perspective.
Yeah, I think that that's very accurate, and honestly too. I mean, I don't know anybody out there who would say that, hey, I don't want my work to be sort of valuable, right? I think that especially a lot of the folks that are drawn to being CPAs. I mean, they're high achieving folks, generally speaking, and certainly they want kind of what they're doing on a day to day basis to be meaningful. Let me ask you this though, because I think that so we talked about kind of the new working environment. You said that that students are kind of maybe looking for maybe a little bit more autonomy coming out of of school. What do you see, as kind of being how students are preparing for kind of that new work environment? What are colleges and universities doing? And maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing, maybe what VCU is doing to kind of prepare students for this new world where we're working remotely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think obviously the students, similar to having been in the working world, have been experiencing taking classes online, some of them completely asynchronously, some of them synchronously, like what we're doing now.
Right.
And so it's not, some of the skill sets I think are being developed the same way they would have been developed if they were in the working world, right? Like they've
Yeah.
still had team assignments and they have to work with someone, but just not face to face. And how do they do that? So I think to some extent, I mean, the fact that it wasn't like, oh, the working world went virtual or remote and the university didn't,
Right.
we did too. And so at least our students, I think, kind of, they've learned to work with that. If anything, I think coming back face to face with my students this semester, it's been a learning curve for all of us. I think students definitely got used to having that autonomy, planning out their days differently. At VCU, we have a lot of commuter students,
Yeah.
and they don't like commute from 30 minutes away. They commute from Northern Virginia. They
Sure.
commute from Virginia Beach. So suddenly it's, oh wait, I have to be in a car for an hour or 2 hours or 2.5 hours to get to class.
Yeah.
So I think kind of the shifting back and forth, I think is something that they're now currently learning how to kind of balance. I picture that hybrid model of work and
Right.
how to kind of manage. Some days I'm at home and some days I'm face to face, and how do you balance that? So I think some of that stuff is just kind of coming naturally through just the way that we are experiencing stuff the same as the working world.
I
Um,
would also say too, and just for the folks here who maybe aren't from the Richmond area, I mean, if you're coming from Northern Virginia, I mean that's a drive here, folks. So for those of you who are maybe aren't as familiar with kind of that territory of the country, it can take a while. So there's definitely a drivenness that has to happen there. There's definitely got to be some motivation there to get to class. So one of the things that I think is interesting about this is I heard from somebody here recently that they felt like that the working remotely actually forced them to be kind of more self-starting than necessarily kind of being off kind of in a traditional working environment. Because to kind of your point that you have to sort of plan out your day. You're the one responsible for kind of putting in your time. And so that's some of those things, that they felt like, this practitioner that I was talking to, that they felt like that was kind of a good thing in a lot of ways, is because it forced them to kind of be, kind of more organized and really sort of productive during the day. Do you think that that's? I mean, do you think that that's true? I mean, is it has this working kind of remote work environment, has that taught us to be kind of more self-starting in a way in order to be successful? I gotta do it myself. There's less structure.
uh, I mean, to some extent, yes. I mean, it probably depends on the person. I mean, I think people in accounting, tending to be a little bit more type A, probably
Yeah.
adjusted to this a little bit easier. Forcing themselves into a schedule and things of that nature. So we probably had that to our benefit going into this, to be a little bit more schedule oriented by nature. So yeah, I mean, I think that definitely helps.
Yeah, I think I think that that's a kind of an interesting dynamic there. So, I mean, how are students feeling about kind of this working world? I mean, are people excited, or are they kind of dreading it, or I mean, are they because I think it's kind of interesting. I think there's been a lot of negativity. I mean, I think during the pandemic, I think that I don't know. I know that there's been some positives that have come out of it, but I think a lot of companies they kind of look at it as just being kind of a difficult time.
Yeah.
Are students excited to get out there into the working world, or has the pandemic maybe put a damper on kind of their spirits in terms of being excited about going out and being a working professional?
I think they're excited. Overall, I mean, I talked to my students just this, I guess, last week maybe about, we had a practitioner in and we were talking about, kind of that there are three options right now, right? There's the I work completely remotely,
Right.
basically all the time job option. There's the hybrid option where there's some combination of a few days in the office, a few days out of the office. And then there's I'm in the office face to face every day. And I polled my students, I said, knowing what you know now, like, what is your preference? Like, what would you choose? Because it factors in, right, to like some of these decisions on the firm's ends of what they should offer in
Right.
terms of these future models.
Right.
And basically, somewhere between 5 and 10% said I'd be totally fine working completely asynchronously, and
Hmm.
another 5 to 10% said I really just want to be face to face all the time. Like, I'd rather just be in the office. That's just me. And then everyone else was in the middle. That they do
Okay.
want both. They want to have to not necessarily be in the office every day to have that control over things. But I think probably everyone's recognized to some extent that we are social by nature.
Right.
And it is not the same to always be talking to people virtually, to be connecting with people in that way, especially in nowadays. I mean, we've talked about that idea around the Great Recession, and to
Yeah.
me, a huge part of this is the lack of cohesion, the
Yeah.
lack of connection to your firm, your team, your supervisor. I do research in this area, and
Yeah.
that is a huge reason why people are like, well, I'm gonna go somewhere else, because
Yeah.
they don't feel any connection to stay.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just hugely problematic. I think all the firms probably have to find a way to connect with these employees, especially the ones just coming out of school. They want it. They're looking for it. There's been a lack of it in the last 2 years of their university environments. And so I just think it's critically important for the firms to find ways to connect with the people that they're bringing in when they're onboarding them, that their process may need to be doubly as strong as it was 2 years ago to form these connections early, so that they feel it, even if the people are going to be working more remote than not. It's critical to keeping, I think, these students long term.
I think that you make a great point there. I mean, about the, just kind of the connection and things like that. I mean, it is possible, I think, and, feel free to tell me if you disagree. But I think it's possible to find connection even from a distance. But it's harder. And I just don't think that, and I still think even after 2 years, we're just not used to it. I mean, we're just not used to connecting with people from, over a computer. That's just not, we're just not used to kind of maintaining that connection over a computer. And I think for companies, this presents a challenge, and it presents a challenge that is probably going to stick around, at least in the immediate future.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it into like a very like simple thought, right? Like, if you were in the same audit environment or client site or, coming into the office, you would have those points during the day where your supervisors come by and be like, hey, let's go grab a coffee.
Right.
And then you're chit-chatting about maybe some work stuff, but maybe some other stuff. And to me, like, if it is going to be primarily remote, how do you create that? Because those are the moments that I think people build that identification with the firm, feeling like they're connected with their team. That is something that I think, and even here at VCU, we talk about that. How do we kind of redevelop some of these opportunities to connect with the students that feel more real, that are maybe a little bit more informal?
Right.
Because so much of what's happened with the remote environment is everything is so formal. Schedule a meeting, schedule a Zoom. It's that lack of just those connections that you would make if you were just all sitting around in an audit room or at the office site. It's those pieces that really are, I think, critical to figure out how to bring them in if you're not going to be in a face-to-face environment on a regular basis.
And I think that this is really a problem that a lot of companies are facing right now, really in terms of just branding and identity. I mean, if we don't have sort of like a physical storefront, how do you sort of create identity? And I think a lot of companies, not just in the realms of recruiting, but also just kind of in the realms of just kind of general business and just kind of marketing and, customer awareness. I think that a lot of folks are kind of struggling with that idea of kind of just how do you differentiate yourself when nobody's out.
Or how do you create firm culture? I mean, we talk about the importance of firm culture and tone at the top. Well, how is tone at the top conveyed when no one is in the office?
Right.
How does this stuff get created? It's important, and I think it's a work in process for everybody right now. How to make that happen. I've heard some people say that like they're working completely remotely, but then they're still having like they're having like happy hours like once a week, and they're having like a all hands on deck meeting every Thursday morning, and just bits of pieces that are connecting so that then those items are face to face, and they're creating that environment even though they're not seeing each other like they normally would.
Right. I think that I do think that is that's a fantastic point. I mean, in some cultures, I think that works really well. I think in other cultures too, I think it also comes across as being kind of stale. So it's got to kind of be something that sort of forms naturally. Otherwise, I think that in some ways you're kind of reaching. So it's interesting to see that dynamic. Let's go back to something that we kind of pointed to kind of straight off. We were talking about kind of the number of students that were actually going into accounting. We talked about kind of salary ranges and that kind of stuff. But even before the pandemic, we were seeing drops in the number of people actually taking the CPA exam. And I guess is it strictly salary that is kind of keeping them away from accounting, or is there something else that is about our industry, that some sort of trait of our industry that is maybe keeping people away that maybe we haven't really thought about?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, unfortunately, I think the stigma around what an accountant is, what they look like, it's still there, in the sense of that, what a CPA is, when you see whatever you create in your head around that idea, a student still kind of picture that, especially the ones who are choosing their major early on. They don't have any idea what accountants do or what their career paths could be. It's one of the things that I think here at VCU, and I know other schools are working on this too, is creating those opportunities to talk about what the career paths can look like. Because I think for a long time there was this just kind of, I don't know, there was this just known value. Oh, the Big Four, this or the CPA. It had this like known value to it. And for whatever reason, that that doesn't come through as strongly as it used to, at least with the students. They don't see it. They need to understand, why. Whereas before, I think I even, when I was going through my accounting program, it was like, okay, I knew I'm going to get my CPA and I'm going to try to get into a Big Four. And like, that was just the path. And I didn't even really, I don't know, in some sense, I didn't even really know why. I just
Yeah.
did it because I knew that it would mean good things for me down the line. And
Right.
I don't think it's no longer a good enough reason for them to just go down that path. There is a need to convince them of the opportunities that both the CPA and an accounting degree present down the line.
Do you think that some of that is kind of the eroding, sort of maybe what, and this is kind of a harsh term, but the commoditization of the industry? So, a lot of the skills that we typically have associated with accountants, a lot of that stuff is being automated. It's being outsourced for very cheap, and so you've seen some erosion of fees. Is that maybe some of it? Is this kind of commoditization? I don't know a better word for it, of the industry itself.
I think there's definitely some concern, especially for students that aren't very familiar with accounting, that honestly think that, and this is something that never would have thought of even 5 years ago, that they're not sure that accounting is going to exist, and that that they're still going to be able to have a job in 10 years. That thought actually exists in students right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy to me. I totally agree that there are some accounting type of work that will no longer exist, that people will no longer be doing portions of that work. But when I talk to my students about it, I'm like, this is great. This is the stuff you didn't want to do
Yeah.
anyways. I was
Right.
like, the cool stuff, which is just getting bigger and bigger in my mind of what we can do with, knowing accounting, and especially now with the data analytics. I mean, the skill set of having a strong analytics background and knowing accounting, and therefore how to translate what you're finding in data into a way that people can understand it. I mean, there's only accountants that are going to be able to do that, and that's
Right.
not going to go away. And that stuff is cool and interesting. So getting that down and out, when students are choosing majors, is just
Yeah.
it's a challenge how to kind of bring that in. So that they understand, that we're not saying accounting's going away. We're saying that old school, what you think of accountants, that is going away. I do think that
Right.
a lot of that stuff that we used to do by hand manually, that's going away, and that's fine. I don't think that's a problem with that. It opens up so much more opportunity, but it's the conveying that information in a way that they get it and understand that that's a good thing, is hard.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And just to be clear too, I mean, to the folks that are out there that are listening to this, I mean, there's been things in a lot of different industries, especially in financial services, not just in accounting, but talking about how jobs are going to be replaced by machines, right? So, we're going to have computers do all your investing for you. We're going to have computers pick out all your insurance products for you. And oh, by the way, we're going to outsource all of your tax returns, and your audits
Right.
are going to be automated and everything. Okay, look, folks, it still hasn't happened. And, the skill set, I think, is what you're pointing to, is that the skill set is going to continue to evolve, because really, kind of the preparation of the tax return or the vouching of accounts receivable is not necessarily, that's not the skill set. The skill set is the objectivity, the analytical skills, and things like that has developed in the industry. And that stuff you can apply to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Not just, the as you rightly said, the mundane tasks that I think, historically have always been, associated with the profession.
Right, exactly. And I think, I mean, all of the kind of consulting opportunities that come with that in terms of improving processes at
Right.
companies, right? I mean, being able to make those connections to help companies, embed these technologies in to make everything more efficient on their side of it. I think accountants can play a big role in that. I mean, especially, the auditor's background is understanding processes is
Right.
part of a huge part of what they do. And so I think there's going to have to be some shifts in the way that some of this works. But yeah, I think conveying that down to the students is really important. I think for the profession as a whole. We've been talking at VCU about trying to come up with like a gen ed of
Yeah.
accounting, which is kind of a hard because gen eds are usually pretty liberal arts focused.
Sure.
But trying to connect with students much earlier
Right.
before they're choosing majors to try to get a chance to get in the door for them to think about, what types of careers could come out of taking that path. Because it's not easy to get to those students early enough on before they make these big decisions about the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Hey, well, so let me ask you this. I mean, so you love being an accountant, okay? You love being a CPA. I love being a CPA. What can CPAs who really are passionate about the profession? Because honestly, folks, I mean, I talk to them all the time. I'm sure that you do too, Lindsay. What can they do to really sort of, to help out in this manner, to really sort of give the students the information on what accountants really do and the things that that they can look forward to if they choose this profession?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I know here at VCU, especially now, because I do more than maybe any other time. What students are saying is, I want to know what's going on in practice, like how this
Mhm.
actually works. I mean, and I think they always did, but it's really important to them for them to understand what what it looks like to work in accounting. And so, I think if from practitioner's perspective, I would reach out to whatever university you're an alumni of, or a university that's in your area, to the accounting department, and say, hey, do you ever need guest speakers? Do you ever
Yeah.
need people for this? Because I mean, I know, we've just recently started working on a database to basically list out, practitioners, things that they would be willing to talk about, different classes that they might fit into, and other opportunities, things that they might help out with beta alpha psi so I think doing those types of things can help faculty bring life to these topics in a way that we can't necessarily by ourselves, because we don't have that. We're in it practice at this
Right.
point. We're teaching it, and many of us have been there at some point in time. But having the people that are there right now talk about things that are happening and how they're happening, I think, is very beneficial to the students.
I would also say this too. I mean, to you practitioners that are out there. So I do occasionally come in and speak at VCU. That's I live in Richmond, and so that's something that I do. The other thing that I would also say too is that I mean, part of the issue here is that we also need to put, I think, in my opinion, to place a higher value on our services. I mean, making sure that that people understand, our clients understand, that our what we do is valuable. And I talked to a lot of tax practitioners about that. Is just making sure that that clients understand kind of what you're giving them is more than just kind of the tax return, the deliverable. Same thing holds an audit too. It's more than just kind of the auditor's report. It is the process of going through the audit. It is the process of going through the returns. It is the process of, working with people, talking with people, planning with people about how they can do better and how they can run a better business. That's what has value, and you have expertise. And so
Right.
I think sometimes I think we kind of sell ourselves short as an industry, in that regard.
Agreed.
So let me ask you this then. I mean, when students are kind of looking at, various parts of the industry, out of the ones that do want to go into accounting, are they gravitating towards anything in particular? Are they gravitating towards audit or tax or, data analytics or forensic accounting? I mean, do you see any sort of patterns that are kind of developing in terms of where people are moving towards?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about kind of if I think about, my 8 years of being in the classroom, and just has anything changed about it? I would say minimally, like
Okay.
maybe, 35% were going into audit and 35% into tax and 30% when we're going into something else. I think that's maybe dropped a little bit. Audit and
Yeah.
tax are a little bit lower than they were before. But I mean, the firms are also not hiring as many audit and tax as they used to. So to some extent, maybe that is righting itself in and of itself. I
Yeah.
do think that there's some students I do think there are more students that think they're interested in the flashier
Yeah.
directions, forensic accounting, or they'll say, oh, well, I want to do consulting. And I say,
Yeah.
well, what does that mean to you to
Right. Right.
consult in accounting? What would you consult about?
Yeah.
And I try
Right.
to kind of like, well, what is it really that you want to do? And at the end of the day, it oftentimes will say, well, I want to add value. And I say, okay, well, come back to, an audit and tax, add value, kind of just what you were talking about, that the process of doing those things add an enormous amount of value. And it's the starting place to be able to consult about other things is to develop those skills. So I try to bring them back, but there's something to be said for like, oh, it just sounds flashy, or and
Right.
I understand their thought. For whatever reason, they struggle a little bit more with how audit and tax add value compared to forensic accounting or consulting, like because of just what they're called, almost because they really don't have much of a basis to know that those are directions, besides that there's just something that seems like it's a little different in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So what sort of things are you excited about that VCU is doing? Because I know that you're involved in a lot of initiatives and things like that right now. You're a great advocate for students going into accounting, entering into the industry. What sort of things are you guys doing right now that you're excited about?
So we're looking to bring our minor in accounting back, which I'm super excited about. I think for a couple of reasons. One is I think we all there's that that we haven't connected with as many students that are in other majors and other schools as we would like to. Students who are entrepreneurial by nature, because that is a huge focus of VCU, is this idea of entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
It's something that this university as a whole has been pushing. And in order to be an entrepreneur, it's very hard to not have some accounting skills,
That's true.
to some extent,
Yep.
especially early on, because when you're an entrepreneur, you don't usually have a lot of employees,
Right.
at least not in the beginning. So, that was kind of what part of our thought process around that is, to just kind of connect more students into an accounting degree. We have a lot of like health science majors, and like fashion merchandising and these other areas that are outside of the business school, but they really need some accounting skill sets. And the hope behind that too is that some of them really see a value in more value than even just the minor, and we start to kind of pull more students back into the major. And that maybe that becomes the major and the other thing becomes the minor, because I think having the strong skill set in accounting kind of lends you to do a lot of different things. But you have to get them in the classroom in order to make those connections. And I think that's one of the things that we're just really trying to work on, is thinking about how we can connect more with students, especially the ones outside of the business school, to just think about the paths and the careers and where they might take their lives.
So, impact of a new accounting minor, trying to make sure that we are, that students know about kind of more things that are going on in accounting. Lots of good stuff that Lindsay and a lot of the folks that are working in our university and colleges right now that are working on, folks. So, if you get a chance, if you're listening to this, and you get a chance to support some of the things that are going on in the school, I think that's a great way to give back to the profession. So, Lindsay, how if people would like to get a hold of you to maybe talk about anything that we talked about today, or maybe just to connect about some of the things that they can do to support students, how would they do that?
Email is the best way. You can look me up on the VCU faculty. That's probably the easiest way, and I'd be happy to have a phone call or a Zoom call or however you want to do it to connect, or a coffee.
There
If
you
you are
go.
here in
There
Richmond,
you go.
I'm happy to make those connections face to face too. I'm constantly looking for them these days.
Yeah, there you go. There you go, folks. So anyway, Lindsay Andiola is doing a lot of great work at VCU, and again, folks, this is our profession, and we have a valuable profession. We offer a valuable service, and we need to let the world know about it, and that starts with telling students about it. So anyway, Lindsay, thanks so much for being on Accountable.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Accountable. Be sure to subscribe for more interviews and insights from today's business leaders.
All tax preparation is performed by Peters Tax Preparation and Consulting PC. CFO Capital Management and Cruz Financial Organization do not prepare tax returns. Peters Tax Preparation and Consulting PC is not affiliated with CFO Capital Management and Cruz Financial Organization. CFO clients or prospective clients are never obligated to use Peters Tax Preparation and Consulting PC as part of any financial planning or investment management services offered by CFO Capital Management and Cruz Financial Organization.